So I have a way I'm going to start for both of you, and you can do with this what you will, but I took the bait, so I'm taking the bait. So I said, I'm seated here with Paul, who recently we were told maybe is the most dangerous artist in Los Angeles. We were told that by a New Yorker. And Nadya, who rightly so, I think, could give him a run for his money about that. So what I'll say here, and maybe it's because I also realized I'm 20 years younger than Paul and 24 years older than Nadya. And I am so quintessentially Gen X, it's not even funny. And so it's in my DNA that I'll just say, and it relates to what I wrote in the little text I wrote for the show, is that one person's dangerousness is another person's grace. And I focused on that idea of grace with this show because I really wanted to bring that point home. But my first question to both of you, and to maybe just get you talking to each other, which is the real point here, is what it means to each of you to be dangerous.
You go.
Okay.
You have more experience. You have more experience.
I mean, I think that line in that thing is just a line for the beginning of an article to raise sensation. So it's like I actually think it came from the editor and not even the writer.
I could believe it.
What does it mean to be dangerous? I don't think I'm that dangerous, but I think in one way the work I make is pretty insular. Like in a way, I kind of make what I feel. Like I make it's like regurgitating society or throwing up. I kind of take it in and then throw it up. And I often don't think about trying to be provocative. I mean, sometimes I do, but, but it's like I think I'm making what I think I have to make, what I think is necessary, and I don't. And the other thing that's important to me is to not pay attention to the viewer or what I should be doing, what people think I should be doing. It's all has to be, I do what I want to do, what I believe in. And I think we live in a period of time of like somebody said, oh, your work's getting more extreme. And I said, well, we're living in pretty fucking extreme situations. So I think I'm just going along with the current, like it's rough water, and so,
Yeah,
like,
Nadya, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a question to you, Paul.
Good.
When you, for the first time, started to put this transgression in your performances, like when you threw around whatever it was, mayo or ketchup and vomited, like you were young, right? So like, were you super transgressive growing up, or you were a shy kid and at some point you decided to be more, performative?
Well, I mean, I think I was pretty lucky. I ended up in a school, which is very weird, at the University of Utah, which is so strange. And it was quite radical at that moment. The teachers were all Marxists, and the Peace and Freedom Party, which was a form of the SDS, was formed in the art department. And
Marxism is so conservative in Russia, you have no idea.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that it actually can lead to transgressive gestures.
And well, what was really interesting is that also at the same time, the school did away with drawing classes and initiated experimental films. Mm-hmm. So, and then Happenings, Capro's book had come out in '66, and I was in school in '66, and I had a friend who told me about Yves Klein. So that school and that moment was, you know, instrumental. Like it just sent me on I think I really just believed in all of it.
So you really became radicalized while studying in Utah still?
Yeah, in Utah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
But they
Because
fired,
it would be
they
Russians.
fired all the teachers, right? Like after,
got them fired?
and I left and went to San Francisco. So, you know, like they fired everybody.
But
So it was a very short period, about 4 or 5 years, that the school was like that. You know?
But people still like have 17 wives in Utah, or it's not like that.
They probably have 100, but you know, like I don't. Yeah, I mean Utah's. You know, look, I was, you know, surrounded by conservatism.
But would you say the school was pretty separated from a lot of that, with
Yeah,
that
the school was
faculty and that?
separated, yeah.
I mean, art
There
schools,
was a-
especially then, could be a kind of bastion against, you know, right across the wall, the other
I
side
mean,
of the
there was
street.
no,
could be,
you know, you didn't know of. I never knew of any polygamous. I didn't.
Right.
They weren't around. They were hiding. You know. I mean, the most famous, Jeb? He was up the street from where we kind of lived, and I didn't even know it. You know. So that kind of could. But I'm sure. You know, I think a lot of my work has to do with. I think, well, patriarchy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about patriarchy.
That's the link here. And I would say that question was deliberately me just like kind of fucking around about dangerous, because the whole point is you two maybe are the least dangerous artists around, because what's dangerous is the rest of the fucking world right now. What's dangerous is what people are thinking and trying to think about the kind of work you guys are trying to do. That's where the danger is. That's where it always has been. That, like, you know, I mean, Paul, you are as family values as it gets, you know, in my opinion, with the kids and the whole, like, you know, like, that's the danger, you know, and that, you know, Nadya, you having had, you know, serious danger presented to you on many occasions, you know, but again, the kind of, and again, I recognize it so much from a much more coddled New York version of like acting out but you know, I was thinking of like, one person that came to my mind, I was lucky to have met Jill Johnston before she passed away. You know, Jill, the writer of Lesbian Nation, and you know, Jill, I just wrote that she wrote in Lesbian Nation, she quoted Valerie Solanas, who wrote the Scum Manifesto, and she said, Valerie Solanas said, dropping out is not the answer, fucking up is. And I think that is not dangerous in and of itself in terms of what should be valued. What's dangerous is the reactions to it so like I saw the Vanity Fair thing and thought that just gives a lot of assholes sort of carte blanche to think something about Paul's work that just reinforces a kind of structure that doesn't really help many artists in the long run. You know, so that, all right, soapbox done. Sorry.
What did the Vanity Fair say about danger?
Vanity Fair did a big article about this and called him that said he might be the most dangerous artist in Los Angeles.
I mean, like, the danger is a very situational term. So it's like, what is dangerous in this particular situation to this particular group of people? Like, you can't extrapolate it to the entire society, can you? I mean, I guess when you talk about the seriously terrible stuff like rape,
we're presented with kind of propaganda in that way. It relates to fear, I think, often. And the job, I think, that the two of you do so brilliantly is just skewering that constantly through great things like humor and play. You know, the things like the kind of playfulness that's in all of your work and the work you did with Pussy Riot and everything. That is just crucial. You know, I learned from ACT UP that like laughing in someone's face was somehow mostly the most powerful thing you could do to an asshole.
Or
you know?
shooting them.
Yeah, well, no, but sometimes the shooting gives them what they want. I mean, you know, that's the issue with the insanity of it. I mean, you know, a kind of what's packaged and presented as kind of normalcy is anything but. Yeah. And your work, both of your works, threaten that. I mean, Paul, what drew me to this show, the gallery knows this, is that you're going to show these paintings.
What?
Because it was paintings that you were going to like stick your neck out in Los Angeles and put a few great paintings, you know. Did he just say Dick Van Dyke? Are we good?
It's just a guy with hacks, but it's not it's not the guy we
Okay, thank you. All right. But anyway, that
Los Angeles.
you know, how great to like, you know, come back to town. I mean, bring the work back to town and put these paintings up with the drawings and of course the sculptures. And as I said in the text, the missing elephant in the room, which is the moving image, to not have it be here, but its presence is everywhere. I'm curious what you're, now that it's up, like what you're thinking about that.
Well, I mean, I think, well, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I kind of feel is going on is the censorship from the art world. And, you know, these pieces I look at as kind of, you know, they're things that were made in relationship to pieces that haven't been seen.
Right.
And so they're, you know, and they're kind of like a sampling of some sort, like the bodies are things that are from the film. So at this point, you know, the work, I guess, you know, like where, I don't know, in some ways the work I'm doing, there's this kind of stuff can go in a gallery. The other stuff can't go in a gallery maybe, or maybe it'll change. Maybe the art world will change and something will happen, right? Like maybe the situation going on in the world will make the work will change from decor, like decoration, and constant decoration. I'm not against it in one way, but I'm just against it that's controlling everything, right? So, I mean, there's the situation of the art world, and then there's the situation of the world we're living in.
Right.
And, you know, in a way, the situation in the art world is just, for me, it just seems like dumbness on all kinds of levels.
Right.
Like the fact that it feels like the rich control it. And there's a thing there, there's that. And I think, you know, that's why, you know, how do I don't exactly fit in the art world, and I don't exactly fit in the film world, and I don't exactly fit in the theater world or any other world. But, and then I come out of something.
If you don't fit in the art world, I don't know who does. If you don't fit in the art world, I don't know who does.
Well, I fit in some way, but in another way, you know, their work, you know, the last 10 years of work has hardly been seen. So it's like, you know, how many times have I been censored in the art world? 4 or 5 times in the last year or something like that. And not in direct, some direct, and then others just like, you know, no, we can't do that.
We have
you know.
shows scheduled until 2035. We have shows scheduled until 2035. Thank you. Write to us after your death.
Well, the other thing that you two share, in my opinion, from seeing Police State 2, your piece of Mocha, is that neither of you are completely like jettisoning something that we could call aesthetics. You know, that like, again, these paintings just annihilate all the shitty, lousy painting that's out there in the art world today. And people who know me know I'm on my soapbox about that too. I'm really bored with most of it. But in your work too, there are things that maybe in another context could be read conservative. And that's always the problem with these labels.
Like what?
In terms of aesthetics, in terms of like being interested in a certain sort of craft.
Tell me more. I'm
Would
stoked.
you say there's craft in your work?
I want to be conservative. I mean, like, what would be more radical for me?
Well, no, but my point is that these terms they just constantly upend each other. You know, that again, you brought the point home, Nadya, earlier when you talked about it's situational. You know, that a conservative, like, you know, I went to college, a very conservative liberal arts school. Dan Quayle went there. You know, and by being an art major there was enough that I was instantly radical. You know, and like, I'm just from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Like, I don't even know what that means. But, you know, it's about the projection that's put on when the two of you, from what I've seen, and I know Paul's work much longer than yours, and is you're just trying to get the damn work done. You know, you're just trying to make what you want to make and say the things you want to say. And the projection, and it's not just you two. I mean, this is what, back to Paul's point, the art world is good about projection, about making sure, again, Paul, is he the most dangerous artist in Los Angeles? It fits a kind of laziness and a kind of wishful thinking that somehow lets people think that they're not the weird ones. You know, that they're somehow, and that like, look at Paul, look at this work, it's so weird. I mean, when you did the show at Luring in '93, you showed Bossy Burger, you know, with the set from the Hogan Family, which was a reasonably successful sitcom. And you're wearing the Alfred E. Newman mask as a chef, and you're just skewering masculinity left and right. But it was also damn entertaining and fucking hilarious. And that it could be all those things at once. And that was in '93, at the height of like identity politics in New York. I mean, what I've seen indirectly, the kind of performative things, like the humor, it goes back to things I know from, you know, like Jill Johnston's days. I mean, again, if you know, I know Norman Mailer here. There's a famous panel that Norman Mailer moderated where Jill Johnston totally upended the whole thing in a very hilarious way that involved two women getting up on stage and having fake sex with her. You know, like,
nice.
That's not going to happen tonight.
Or
So I don't think. I mean, you know, I didn't plan it if it is. But anyway, the point being is that, you know, that the core of what, like that, back to Paul, you know, that what excited me about the paintings in particular is that they're really good. You know, they're really good. And I don't say that very often these days. And that can be okay in the face of everything you're talking about. Supposedly, right, we're all talking about Josh Klein's article that was in October magazine about the New York art world and real estate that everyone's talking about now, right? That's what we've been told. Everyone's talking about this article. And he really goes against painting in it. And I said, well, you know, what's going on in the market with painting hasn't helped painting either. You know, like, so the idea that somehow painting is the enemy, full stop, is not true either, in my opinion. But again, I think that you know, the range of what you presented at MoCA, to me, was what was very provocative in the range of what you're trying to make in your work. And Paul, again, you were like, where does Paul fit? You've done video, you're just constantly moving in the work, and that everything is kind of interrelated, but nothing ever gets completely pinned downable. Would that be an accurate thing to say? Would you accept that you're not trying to fix things into a certain place, a certain way of being?
A certain way of being? I mean, I'd say I think that, well, Jesus. I think these paintings, for me, I was making this film, and the film, I wanted to make a film that was about America, where it was about pioneers going from something like Kansas, Missouri, and crossing the plains, and everybody's happy. And it's all kind of cliched Hollywood. And by the time, and it's all based on this thing by about the Donner Party. And by the time they get to the Sierras and they get up in the snow, then they eat each other. And it's kind of this thing where I kind of believe America's on a death drive. And if not, maybe even humanity's on a death drive. Like, we're saying how close we can get to killing ourselves. And I think when I started making that, I switched and decided I wouldn't use covered wagons, I'd use a stagecoach because it looked like a skull. And I thought it was about 3 stages of violence. And the first stage is the libertines, and the libertines are in the coach. there's 4 of them, Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, Jesus Christ, and Mary Magdalene. They're the libertines. And the Adam and Eve are the innocent. And so the first stage of violence is abuse, verbal and sexual abuse, but nobody dies, right? They use shit, they shit on each other, whatever. But the next set of violence is that the stagecoach gets attacked by a group of men. And that's what these are.
Right.
And there it's about men who were berserkers. They stopped the stagecoach, they don't want the money, they just want to kill everybody. And they're berserk. And I thought, in some ways I thought, wow, you know, looking back, it's ice. You know, like the body's over the top of somebody, right? And, you know, I think what's this, you know, when you say, I don't remember what you say, what did you call it? You said something like...
The point.
The point,
yeah.
I think the point is just the absurdness of what humanity's constructed. Mm-hmm. It's the construction that's absurd, or absurdity.
Do you think it was always here?
Huh?
Like when we were living in caves?
Was it always there?
Mm-hmm. The absurdity.
I think possibly men. I don't know. Well, I don't know what we were like, right? Maybe, I don't know. But I see it here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chance. I would say that's a chance.
It's kind of what I kind of feel that it's the subject of, I think the work is about existence and the subject of, and violence being the most absurd act. The violence is the absurdity. I do think there's such a thing that now, like I was just thinking about something which really struck me. I think there's such a difference in the experience of what it is to be in Russia and what it is to be here. Mm-hmm. And is America changing? Yeah, I mean, a while back in the studio, there was this whole thing. I was supposed to go to Europe, and everybody was talking, Paul, you can't take that fucking telephone with you. You know, they'll kill you. Just don't take the telephone. Right?
No, it's fine. You can take it.
But yeah, and I'm sitting. We're having this discussion, and there's a person, Nadya, who I don't know whether you know.
Yeah, I've met her.
Yeah, and Nadya was sitting next to me, and this whole discussion's going on about Paul's telephone, right? And at one point, I said to Nadya, I said, dude, what do you think? And she said, I grew up with that, you know? And I think that's really, there is something like there is a difference between what you experience and how you have to negotiate or travel through making art and your life thing. And somebody like me who's had basically all of, you know, freedom. I've had a lot of freedom to do what I want. Sure, there's consequences, but, you know, you can get punched or something, but really, you're pretty, you know, that seems to be changing now, you know. I mean, you know, when Bush was in office, they put me on the no-fly list for 8 years. But it was bullshit because all it was just harassing me, you know? Like it wasn't really
But
real.
you were able to fly?
I was able to fly. They just put me in a room for a couple hours and then let me go, you know? Okay. So, and they audit us constantly. So this kind of,
ouch,
the harassment, yeah, that's there, right? But we are in a different place now, right? Like, what are those prisons in the desert? You know, like it's all a lot about paranoia, you know. But I think the difference between here, even here now, and the freedom that is here, and the freedom of what other people experience, and the lack of freedom that other people experience, you know, like it's, you know, I've been really interested in, and I don't know whether it's true, I've been really interested in what, and you could tell me, concrete poets living in Siberia.
Who?
Concrete poets living in Siberia. I know
Concrete.
this sounds insane, right? Like, okay.
Which poets?
Concrete poets, do concrete poetry. It's
I know concrete architecture. Not
It's
No,
like
that-
conceptualism.
Conceptualism, yes.
form of poetry, yeah.
Okay, I know about Moscow romantic conceptualism, but it's not Moscow romantic conceptualism. It's different.
Different.
No, concrete would be very different than that. Like the
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
tangent.
No,
like
I'm not
think of
familiar,
concrete as like
no.
tangibility.
I remember, or whatever. But, so.
I'm
But I think-
curious.
I'm curious, Nadya, what's your reaction to that? I mean,
To concrete poets, I don't know them, but my question is to Paul. What do you think your first project would be if you had to leave United States and you would be in political exile and you would immigrate to Greenland?
What would be my first project?
Yeah.
Wow. I think it would just come. Like whatever the project was, it would come. I always kind of think that one piece leads to the next piece. And, like going there, the piece would just happen. Like I think I believe in this thing of I just start working and something happens. I just start.
It
so
is.
I don't know what the answer
well,
would
but
be.
another thing I would interject that you brought up with me when we talked is all the times where you've talked about how you make work while you are kind of in a character.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that gets projected onto artists all the time, and both of you, from what I've read, have had your fair share of it, is that somehow the work is you.
Yeah.
No, the work is not you. The work is the work. You made it, but the work is not you. And then I think with Paul, and I think in Pussy Riot and the performances you've done, it's about a kind of the creation of a kind of character space or a kind of performative space. And, that doesn't necessarily work for audience often. They want to believe that somehow they know who Paul McCarthy is, or they know, from seeing the work. But you're playing games with that constantly in the work.
Well, they definitely do learn about the artist by looking at their work. But, there is a level of distinction,
Right.
like
Well, Paul talked-
Robert De Niro isn't a gangster, or maybe I don't know about that,
Right.
but he's
Well, Paul talked to me when we talked earlier about acting like he was a pirate while he was and talking to himself as he's making work, like the idea of adopting a kind of. You called it character when we talked about it.
Yeah, but I don't think I was making drawings about a film that was about Caribbean pirates, which was actually about Bush and Iraq. I didn't really, it wasn't actually trying to be a pirate. I don't, in a way, I
No,
made
again, the
drawings.
word character is
But
the point.
I think it's just a matter of here, these, I was I can't remember his name, Andy Kaufman's alter ego. Tony Clifton. I realized I was talking like Tony Clifton, and when I was painting these, and I decided that Tony Clifton, for some reason, it was all about God, and Tony Clifton was telling me that I don't trust God, and I should trust God, and really, what that was really, it's kind of like a joke.
Right.
Like I'm talking like Tony Clifton. I'm saying, Paul, you don't trust God. Da da da. What that was all about was just not giving, just letting it go. Really just letting everything go. Like nothing's sacred in these things, and that's what that was about. So this idea of taking on a character, there's multiple things that can do. You know.
It can add more sacred dimension on the other hand.
What?
Because I feel I lack a sacred dimension in my life. So sometimes putting on a character, let me add it. I paint icons. Or I look at people who fight in Ukraine. Is this a Ukrainian flag? I look at people who fight in Ukraine and I think that they have this sacred dimension in their lives. They might die tomorrow for something they believe in, and sometimes just putting on this character, putting on a balaclava, pretending to be a superhero, just for a second, it puts me there.
Yeah,
Right.
I think so, yeah.
Again, there's the link when Pussy Riot when it first came to my attention, I immediately thought of again, much safer, but still that the first group in New York they're the Lesbian Avengers, they're like taking on that kind of persona. But again, I was young, but people were at ACT UP meetings because people were dying, and we had a government that seemed to be actively contributing to those deaths in an increasing way. And like when of course the interventions, let's say, that you did in the cathedrals in Russia, of course.
We call them
actions. It made me think of course, the Stop the Church that ACT UP did at St. Patrick's, the infamous, 5,000 people on the street and 100 some in the church that, desecrated the Eucharist and, and very planned, very, but that was because people were dying. People were dying, and again, it's not war, it was a different kind of dying, a kind of the fear being used against, a lot of creative people who we lost. So, again, the point being is that, and I come back to police state, which incredibly moving, but I was going back through that. I love that you were quoted in something I read about how that you ended up, there was a collaboration with the US military because of what and I just thought that, to just sort of claim that and say that, and maybe slightly tongue in cheek, but again, the humor is what gives
real.
it, but it's also what gives it power, that like ultimately, just flipping the script.
No, but the
for a
reason
moment.
why I said that, right?
No, I know, yeah, I know.
Because Trump invaded the LA with National Army
no.
then, and the show was
Believe
closed.
me, I know. Yeah, no, I know. I was, but that you put that out as a very clear statement, I thought reinforced what I'm trying to say about what you've been doing in your work in terms of, and I think it is a linkage. Again, there's a generational interesting conversation here, but there's a linkage from each of you from your respective places, what we're left with as an audience or as someone witnessing what you produced, what messages you're conveying or what you're trying to get us to feel, or however you want to frame it, that that power is, the point and real. And that's why, again, Paul, I thought it was, for me, on the inside, I guess, to do a show like this, to deliberately leave the moving image out, to have there be things that we haven't seen, is kind of moving to me. And again, that's why I hit on this word grace. And I know I was being slightly perverse of bringing that into but there's a kind of grace in, I think, what artists like you do. And we shouldn't let anyone else tell us otherwise. You may not agree with that, and I would be okay with that, but I think that we all need a little more grace in the world. And one place to get it is maybe through these supposedly dangerous artists, these people who have their finger on the zeitgeist, however you want to frame it, and are trying to do something. Because so many people now, in my opinion, seem to be going out of the way to not do something. And you guys are doing something. Boy, okay, I gotta stop. But I think we're up against questions time maybe from my clock, is that?
But I have the one last question to you.
Oh yeah, okay, well Nadya, you had the first question.
I was so fascinated that you said, I don't feel myself like a shaman, I feel more like a clown. How did you get drawn to this clown image?
Oh, the clown and not
The
shaman.
Yeah.
I mean, a long time, a particular clown. Like, I've years ago, I don't know, in the 60s or something, I knew about shamanism to a degree. I was kind of interested in alchemy and shamanism and stuff like that. It was all part of that period of time. And Sufism was a deal. But at one point I came upon this thing of the sacred clowns, which were part of Hopi Indians. And I think there was a story of a sacred clown, a Hopi woman who, there was a chief, and he liked, I guess as the story goes, the chief liked to have a big headdress, clothes, beads, all this kind of stuff. And she, the sacred clown, kept her shit and made the same outfit in her own shit. And that made more sense to me. I never wanted, it's something to do with the artist, like a court jester or something like that.
Yeah,
and,
holy fool.
And not the shaman, that word that was so applied to like boys and stuff like that. I think for me, it was more interested in the clown. And, yeah, that's kind of, so, I don't know, stuck, I was thinking, I've made a lot of videos with Lila Stangenberg. We've made about 100 performances, and there was a whole set where I was, a series of pieces led up to us coming up with this idea of Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, and we thought, because we were working on one piece, and at the end of the piece we were supposed to commit suicide, and it was based on a film, and we thought about going into the woods, and we'll commit suicide in the woods, and someone said, oh yeah, like Adam and Eve. One of us said like Adam and Eve, and then one of us said, oh, A&E, and then one of us said Adolf and Eva. And so then you let the cat out of the bag. So now is the next thing you do for the next 2 or 3 years Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, right? And so we did. We made like, I don't know, 50 performances as Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun, and I had a mustache for quite a while as Adolf Hitler, and which was weird, and also we did it on stage in Germany, and I had that mustache.
Oh, wow.
But the part is that we weren't really I wasn't trying to imitate. I watched a lot of footage of Adolf Hitler, but when we made the thing, I didn't try to act like Adolf Hitler. It was really, I was an American, can't speak German, don't have a German accent, so what it was an American pretending to be Adolf Hitler. And Lilith had changed herself to Marilyn Monroe, so it was a German pretending to be Marilyn Monroe. It went that way, right? But one thing when you were saying about tender, I think you said tender or something.
Grace.
Grace, there we go. The thing that happened in those videos is that it became a love story, really. So it was a story about the entanglement of male and female, and as Adolf Hitler and Marilyn Monroe. And then it was interesting to me because Adolf Hitler, who's more famous as a male, and Marilyn Monroe in the West, in the Western society, So there was this thing, and it has that kind of, there's a tenderness in there. So there was something about, making a work that in a lot of ways has a lot of, it's I guess provocative, or it's and there's a lot of like real like this kind of violence and sexuality and all that, but there's something about the roller coaster, so that someone watching it is just taken on a ride up and down,
Right.
like they're like it goes from one extreme to the next extreme,
Right.
and you end up laughing at something that's fucked up, or you end up, like feeling that kind of, in there, yeah, it's all improvisation, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I said that in the text that if you didn't want to accept my use of the word grace, that I would encourage you to look harder. That it maybe takes some time in work to get to there, but it's here. So, but with that, I'm confident there are questions. And there's a squawking duck. So there's someone has a microphone. Is that what I've been told? Is that what's happening? Oh, he has the microphone. So I'm in charge of picking people. So I guess if you have a question, maybe raise your hand.
What about the idea, thinking about both of you, the face covering? Face covering. As maybe a subversive act or some sort of something, I don't know, something to think about.
Well, I think it's about desire to be more than just yourself. And in my situation, it's just a desire to be a superhero. And indeed, when you put on a mask, you're able to commit crimes that you would not even think about in your normal life. And by crimes, I mean art actions.
Paul. Captain Paul.
I know that years ago I made a videotape where I was used to make videotapes in the studio with a friend in downtown LA, and we had one camera to share. It's in 1970, and we would each make a video. At night we would take turns shooting each other. I said to him, look, I'm gonna. I had motor oil, and I was going to pour motor oil on a telephone book, and I had some cotton and some stuff, and I said, don't show my face, don't show my head. And up until that point, I'd been making structural videos, and my head was always there, my face was part of the thing. But by covering up my head, it changed the situation. I can't tell exactly, but I started this crazy laugh, like a witch, and the telephone book like LA. And in a certain way, I didn't think about it at the time, but it was like I'm putting a curse on LA in a way, like a crazy witch. But that really wasn't what I was thinking about. But the idea of not showing my head and liquid, I think those two things, using liquid or a kind of viscous material and covering my head, starts things. It's when it clicks. And I think that's that thing of the improvisation. It's when all the pieces fit together and something happens then. It's when it's like a kind of magic in a certain way. So liquids and covering the face. But now a lot of times I just put a nose on, Kind of works the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, her, and then you'll be next.
I was just thinking about the context, the cultural context. So when you say, oh, you have no idea how conservative Marxism is in Russia, of course. And now how freedom of speech has become a conservative value in the United States. And so when you're dealing with this kind of dialectical relationship between cultures and a specific historical context, it's like, what is it that you think, I don't want to speak too generally, but what is it within art that can vault through that so that I can watch something within one cultural context, and even though I may not, for example, the Moscow conceptualist romantic poetry is very conservative, but it wasn't then. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm looking for is that gesture that cuts through or bridges both.
Well, I'm personally kind of a theoretical cunt about it. I think you've got to know the cultural context to understand a piece of art, because otherwise you can read it from any perspective you can pick, and it's still valid. Yeah, sure you can, but like if you try to understand what the artist was thinking, then I try to because one example, I don't know, for you it must be Shakespeare, for us it's Pushkin. I fucking hated Pushkin. I hated the guts of that guy, because they make you read his poems and memorize them, and towards the end of the school you just want to shoot him. and he did get shot on a duel. But then you realize that in the 19th century he was a groundbreaking in the way he uses the language, and there is a whole bunch of censored poems of Pushkin that no one told us about, that were all about bodily fluids and fucking and sex and like all sorts of transgressive stuff that they don't teach you in schools. So yeah, I'm a cunt about it. I think it's just like there is no substitute to learning stuff.
Yeah, I'll just add here that I was teaching at School of Arts in Chicago for a while, and Charlie Ray had a big show there, and there were some students, and he was around them, and Charlie has this thing he calls the fire hose of art history, and he took the students in the museum. These students have access to this great museum right across the street, and he's like, the fire hose just comes around and blasts meaning off of objects constantly, and sometimes radically different meaning gets put onto an art object. I mean, the most egregious examples we know now is all the things we've learned about the coloration of Greek and Roman statuary. All the kind of things that have been projected onto form and purity and everything. And we now know that they were painted like a clown, to us. And what I used to do with my students, I always took them to La Grande Jatte, the Seurat in the museum, and say, just so you know, there's a lot of evidence suggests that Georges Seurat, he died at 35, hated these motherfuckers in the park, that are here. And we've turned it into a Broadway musical starring Bernadette Peters, Sunday in the Park with George. That divisionism, all those little dots were seen as a radical, even political act. Seurat wasn't the writer. Signac was the writer of these manifestos. Fénelon was a convicted terrorist for supposedly having bombed a place in Paris. And do people come into the Art Institute, aware of this, aware of the complexities of how that painting is, so the point being is, in another 500 years, if it's still around, who knows what will be seen. Art has this ability to do wildly different things from what it had done before. Not all the time, but sometimes. And all the cultural context in the world, is a battle between that context and what the zeitgeist of the moment is too. What gets pulled out to be looked at again, what gets understood. And again, back to your point about Pushkin, that to recognize a historical moment where yes, there's a kind of radicality there, but you wanted to kill him, because they basically, the life was being drained out of it for you, or you just hated it. Which is a perfectly acceptable thing. Anyway.
Or the Bible, like read the Old Testament. There was probably some sort of historical necessity of telling people that you should not be fucking sheeps. Do we really need to read this book right now? I don't know.
Well, depends where you are, but we have him next, but that book so.
Now, this is for Nadya. I consider you to be one of the most important living artists today. Your work is like the peak of human creativity because it is actually dangerous. You spent 2 years in prison for work that you've done. So my question for you is, now that you are here, and there is, to some degree...
For the next 24 hours, yeah. Then I go to Ukraine.
Being outside of Russia now, away from that imminent danger, what inspires you when you wake up in the morning, and What do you want to be remembered as an artist?
As a holy fool, I like your idea of sacred clown, actually, a lot. I don't personally relate to clown as much, but I like the idea of holy fool, and I think we get away with a lot of stuff. And that's the reason why I am still alive, even though Putin kills his political opponents. Him and people like him, they think, oh, they're just drawing some pictures that actually doesn't change anything. And then when it does, it's too late for them to react. And so, holy fool, I guess, yes. And then my dog, yeah, that's the main source of inspiration these days.
Okay, keep it back to the front.
I can just say it loud enough, I think. We just have a huge political shift in Hungary. What do you
Oh,
think
yeah.
the art world will do now in Hungary, and what will that influence the more strong-willed people of Russia to see and hear? Because Putin's been told no by a whole population, or a huge chunk of that population, that they thought they had dominated for 16, 17 years.
Well, it's hard for me to predict what's going to happen, but
Do you know any artists that are still, they're now living in Hungary, like they are in Ukraine? There's a lot of art coming out of Ukraine, for example.
honestly, I haven't been following Hungarian art scene. I'm a bad person, but I've been in touch with some activists from there. They've been following me for years. That's been very bad. I think it's a major victory for all of us, people who care about freedom, democracy, and freedom of speech, like read in the right way, in the good way, our way. I think that's a big blow to J.D. Vance, to Donald Trump, to Putin. And I hope that Hungary and artists of Hungary will become inspiration for all the neighboring countries, including hopefully Russia. Maybe we'll wake up one day and we'll have our own Maidan. Who knows? That was so cool.
Others? Okay, right here. I don't know who is the microphone. It's coming around.
Shall we move to the last question?
Yeah, I think this might be the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, this question's for you. I'm sort of curious, when you set yourself up to make these works, how much does spontaneity play into the painting composition? And are most of these paintings done in one sitting? Do they sit around? Or is it really, you fucking go for it and they're done? Or if you could kind of elaborate on maybe a little bit of the process of your painting.
I don't paint a whole lot. Most of what I do is drawings, and the drawings are done in a similar way. But these paintings, there's no pre-drawing, and I just start. And usually they're done in one session, sometimes two. So they're, yeah. And the drawings that I've done a lot of drawings where they're in character and they're done on a platform. And a lot of them I've done with Lilith. And so it's two people. She doesn't draw as much, but it's kind of a way of, by doing them together, it's a way of not really, sometimes I don't realize what they are until I stand up. And I don't think of it as a trance, but definitely lost in it.
Yeah, if you go on Hauserverse website, Paul has a show in Paris right now of some of these very large drawings, and I told him on the web, they look amazing. I wish I was there to see them. So I think that we're at the time now, so I want to thank the both of you for this conversation.
Thank you.
It's a highlight for me to be the one to have this, to help this along. And then one last announcement is, over here on the desk, there's some books of Paul's and Nadya's that are available for purchase, and then shameless plug. I did in 2022 a book of 600-page book of all the reviews I wrote between 1988 and 2020, and I just last year did a book of some of my selected essays. They're desk copies there. They're on demand. There's a QR code on each cover that if you order it on any Amazon site anywhere in the world, you get it the next day. So that I just want to make sure that you guys are all aware that there's maybe some great shopping over there at the desk. So thank you to everyone at the gallery, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. That was great.